I started the
There you
recording.
go. I got it. So the agenda items. Actually, I have another one. I'm going to talk about the LF Edge lab resources, but John can get started. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. So do we have Tina? Because we probably should also. She was on
Is
the
she here?
last. I don't see her here.
No, not yet. She was on the last meeting.
Yeah, she was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in any case, I think this last meeting was canceled because of holiday. So this would be the first meeting where we greet Tina as the vice chair. And so Stephen is the chair, Tina is the vice chair. So in sort of the handoff procedure, because I've been kind of doing this for a little while on the SIG release, I wanted to document what we did with respect to the tooling. So we originally started the community, and through discussions with LF, we decided to try out using all of the Google tooling for the project. And so I sort of wrote up the results of that experiment. There were some good things. I think the Google Docs are much nicer than the wiki, but we do have issues with Meet and with sort of who can do recordings and all of that. So anyway, the document's there. This is really more I'm trying to hand off responsibility for managing some of these logistics to SIG Release. And so I wanted to just make sure that everybody was clear. As far as I know, when I sent this out, I haven't gotten much feedback, but there were a few people that were excited to move to Linux Foundation tooling, and there were some people who were not. So I guess Stephen and Tina and this community here will have to figure out, but that process is underway. And in any case, at least moving the mailing lists, we're just the LF, it's in their court right now, let's just say, to migrate the mailing lists and therefore the Zoom links. Like with the TSC, you get an individual email for a Zoom link. Once that migration is complete, this would work in a similar way. You would need a Linux Foundation account, and you would get a Zoom invitation specific to you, and that's how we would do our meetings. Yeah, that's all I have to say about this. Please feel free to chime in on the document if you have opinions, but I'm looking to Linux Foundation and Stephen and Tina to sort of finish this migration.
Yeah, it's been taking a very long time. So it's still on progress. For what we were told is they did a formal process for the TSC migrations, and then that worked. Obviously, most of you guys did attend last Thursday's meeting. And then what we were told is once this is done once, everything else should just logically follow the same flow. So hopefully we'll hear some good news after. Yeah, go ahead, John. Have anything else?
I had a question. What was used before? What is the Linux LF Foundation's recommendation instead of Google Doc?
Yeah, I don't think it's like the wiki.
Is the wiki?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is
there's no shared doc. So they would use Etherpad type thing for meeting sharing on real-time collaboration documents, and then wiki for more official editing of something you want to post.
Oh, not the GitHub Markdown. When we use the .md files for proposals and stuff. Okay.
So this is a good point. There is a section in this document that's sort of incomplete, which says like what tools correspond. So in my mind, we have wikis are too unstable in the sense of too easily edited. Maybe there's ways to lock it down. I don't know, Tina, I see just joined. And so Tina, we wanted to welcome you as the new vice chair here. So you may want to say a few words in a second, but we were just talking about the transition to LF tooling. You can do comments and things on individual parts of wiki pages. I just, I haven't seen it in action in the same way we do with Google Docs. I also, just speaking sort of out of my own experience in the Kubernetes community, where we tend to use Google Docs for initial drafts of things. And then as we kind of start to converge on a design or a set of principles, we'll capture that in GitHub. And in GitHub, we have the ability to set up very transparent and clear access controls and merge controls, so that sort of authoritative things living in Git, to me, makes sense, whereas sort of just informational things or logistical communications make sense in the wiki. Anyway, that's my 2 cents there.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your trust. I'm happy to serve for this SIG. And regarding you talk about using the Google Doc and wiki, and I don't know whether you highlight a sentence and add a comment underneath. Is it reflected to the session or not? But if not, it's we can do add the Google Doc link in the wiki page, so then people can go from there, or we just use Google Doc, the tool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it does make sense. It's just a matter of sort of, I don't know, what are the issues? So we have Google Docs, we have folders for them, but in some sense, the wiki could potentially be more discoverable than the Google Docs in a way. And then, but if we link to the Google Docs from the wiki for more interaction, it's just managing all of that. It becomes tedious, and people forget to add things here and there, and then people are like, can't find things. So I don't know the right approach for that.
I would want to add that we're just starting, but already we're seeing a lot of docs, right? This is kind of a disease of projects where you start to accumulate just a lot of information, and not all of it is always relevant. I think part of the effort we need to do is ongoing maintenance of these folders and wikis, and just to make sure that outdated or irrelevant or not directly relevant pieces of information just don't clutter. It's already getting hard to find documents, and there's already just a lot in the drives. I don't really know how to handle it. It could be by subfolders that are by topic, or the wiki, of course, is hierarchical, so it gives you that. But I wonder if that responsibility should be part of SIG Release's responsibility, just to maintain a clear, cohesive, and useful information base for all of us. Not easy work. Not easy work.
Right, that makes sense to me. But I guess the chair and vice chair would need to chime in on that. I know Bala. I think Bala did do some work in organizing that, Tal, so on your team. Hopefully that the drives are a little bit better.
Yeah, I did very initial. Yeah, thanks, John, for the access. I think what Tal brings out the point, irrespective of, I think I like what John said when he mentioned for the general collaboration, things like that, using the Google Docs, it's more a better collaborative tool, and then authoritative information can go to GitHub. But one of my observation is it doesn't matter, especially the wiki pages experience, is that over a period of time there will be a lot of stale pages. Any project, even internal wikis, any companies as well. So yeah, maintaining that is definitely is going to be an important issue. That's a good point, Tal. So, Tal, are you when you say it's a part of responsibility of SIG release, you
I-
mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm making a very tentative proposal here just to see
Okay.
what the rest of the community thinks. But I do want to add one more point that we have a responsibility not just for our community in terms of information, but also for people outside the community that are consuming Nephio. You know, we're not representing, not all telcos and vendors have the time to invest in Nephio, but they're still interested and they go to the website and look at the wiki. We have reporters, right? Journalists who are going through that information and trying to figure out what this project is about, trying to evaluate it. So the better our information is, the better it is for everybody and the success of this project, I think.
Yeah, thanks. So at certain level, I think it's on everyone. For example, even the readme.md can go stale in Git in a Git repo, right? For example, we are trying to maintain the documentation of a particular thing, and we update the code, but we forget to update the documentation. That can also go stale. So how exactly it is a pertaining problem? How exactly we need to tackle this? Or do you think, I mean, do you mean when you say tell that it's responsibility of SIG release, did you intend to say that they are triaging periodically and pinging people who are not keeping up to date, things like that?
I don't really know. we don't, you know, maybe it's the TSC who should really take care of that, but it seems like they have a lot of their plate anyway. But it seems like it would be nice if we had some sort of function and information chief or something like that. I'm not really sure how we would handle it organizationally, but I feel like we need that function.
Okay, Alexis.
If I may suggest as well on the topic of ownership, it could be something as follow, where each SIG own the responsibility of their own documentation, and SIG release would own the responsibility of like the user facing type of documentation, where this is how you deploy, this is how you consume the API. Rather, like as I believe the SIG release will be gating our releases, so what we give in the hands of end user, they might just be that gatekeeper for user related documentation, and each SIG keep their own doc under their own roof, quote unquote. It doesn't need necessarily to be, well, it would be better if it has the same look and feel, but at least it alleviates some of the burden on the SIG release team and dispatch that a little bit throughout SIGs.
Yeah,
makes
that
sense.
makes sense to me. I would add that I'm just thinking out loud here that I think that the main differentiation would be between proposals and actual things that are accepted. Right now, everything's mixed together, and that's okay because we're all in the proposal phase.
There's nothing accepted.
Yeah, it's important, you know, if somebody does a Google search or a Bing search and finds information somewhere, and they're not, you know, they might mistake a proposal for something that we're actually doing. So we might need to be careful with that. Yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit of prior art. I'm sure there's others who have prior art as well on this. So a few different approaches there from a few different projects. Kubernetes, which is much grander in scale, obviously, than we are today, has a formal process for enhancement proposals. It's quite a bit of management overhead to manage that. Those enhancement proposals have various gates they go through before and it's all done in GitHub. Although again, early versions tend to be done in a Google Doc with a handful of contributors. And then once it reaches a little bit more mature, or once people sort of figured out what they want to propose, they'll write it up in a Kappa Kubernetes enhancement proposal, which has a very structured format, including like place for like alternatives considered and, you know, many different things. And then that goes through a whole process. Now that's very process heavy because Kubernetes is doing it now for years and years and has thousands and thousands of developers. We would want to go with something much less process heavy. Other communities I've worked in will do things just where it's done in a GitHub issue. Like we probably need to decide that. To me, from my preferred workflow, we would do everything. Things would be tracked formally as to what's a proposal versus what's accepted versus whatever is in GitHub issues. And then you may link out in those issues to Google Docs or whatever that in the initial design phases. And then at some point, that issue becomes some sort of design proposal PR that gets actually merged as a design proposal. This is a sort of lightweight version of what we do in Kubernetes, right? It's not as formalized, but and then that gives you an authoritative source, Tal, of what's an accepted proposal versus what's just in discussion. So anything that's in the issue, you know, that's not merged into the design proposals directory or repository is simply a discussion. And all the tools we use to have that discussion, you know, can be whatever people want to use. But in the end, you need a design proposal written in MD, you know, in Markdown, that's committed and approved. And then we can gate who does those approvals, right? So typically in Kubernetes, for design proposals, it's gated by the SIG owners. We have very few SIGs here. You know, we may do the same. I don't know. We can figure that out later. So that's kind of the most comfortable and familiar procedure for me, and it allows for clarity between what's a proposal and what's authoritative.
Yeah, you know, this issue just came up for me because if we're going to move away from Google Drive and more towards the wiki, I mean, we could create a wiki that has private pages that are members only that not everybody can see, and kind of differentiate between the public pages and the private one. But that will get into its own kind of complicated management. So if we're moving, so the move here towards the wiki, I think, is also a move towards a more public way of working and writing and discussing. So that's why I think this is suddenly becoming maybe more important, assuming we're actually going to do this and move everything to, or move as much as we can to the wiki.
So GitHub is also totally in public, right? Like you can create a private repo, but I wouldn't think we would want to do that. So either way, and the documents are also public, but they're not as maybe discoverable. Right? You have to know what drive to go to, and you can find that in the wiki, but it's a little bit, and you can't differentiate, like you said, between what's a proposal and what's not. So I don't know. Any other thoughts from anybody on this process of how we evolve? I think the issue here is how we collaborate on an initial proposal, and then how we capture that proposal and accept it as an authoritative design that we're going to execute on.
I think
And
the
that,
right way to
I like
Kubernetes.
what you said, John, actually.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Bala.
Oh, sorry. I like what you said, John, about how the proposal works in the initial stages and how it makes its way into an authoritative document in Git. So I think on those two aspects, I like your proposal and what's being followed in Kubernetes as well. And I think it's working well. So I think I like that one on that. And I also liked what Alexis said, individual SIGs responsible for their own documentation. And they're also responsible for managing the documentation. That means removing stale pages, whether it's wiki or docs, things like that, over a period of time, having a triage meetings periodically, being responsible for that, each individual teams. Obviously, SIG release is responsible for releases, so they are responsible for release documents, and they'll be triaging that, and individual SIGs will also be triaging their own documents. So I like all those proposals so far.
Yeah, just some observation I found, like for the developers, like our companies, we are very familiar like GitHub, those things. But for the operators, telcos, some of them, they are architects, decision makers. I feel they can handle wiki, but if I ask them to do GitHub, well, they were a little bit like, oh, I'm gonna submit the code. um, yeah,
But are these different audiences for different types of documents, and you
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily have those level of decision makers, let's say, using Git other than maybe as a viewer for a markdown document type of thing, right? They wouldn't be committing changes. So I think there's definitely an audience of saying, here's the development documents, the KEPs, whatever you want to call them, versus here's the public consumable documentation by different people from different types of business or different business roles.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I think, David, that's a good point. I mean, it depends on what we expect people to do. Like, and maybe this is also coming out of my mental model of Kubernetes, where the steering committee is very hands off, right? I don't know in other Linux Foundation networking communities how deeply involved the steering committee is, and maybe that's why I have a different model. The steering committee it's very much like, here's the high level direction we're going to go, and all the details are done by the SIGs. So this is the model I've had in my head as I've been doing it. So SIGs operating within GitHub, I think, should be something we can expect. I wouldn't expect technical steering committee people to do that. Maybe if they are, like you said, they would consume but not produce. So we do have tooling on top of GitHub where you can, if we say, well, we wanted the TSC to approve things, there's a sort of simple, you can type /approve, right? And it'll approve it automatically. There's no Git interact, no messing around with Git. So those are things we could do. That's like a PROW, what we call PROW. It's a tool built for Kubernetes. Although actually probably GitHub Actions now support that. At the time PROW was built, those didn't exist. So maybe GitHub has a native way to do that now too. So in any case, I agree with Tina saying we did have issues even in the governance. And I had to write up a sort of how-to basic GitHub. And even with that, people made mistakes because it's easy to make mistakes in the GitHub workflow. So, I hear that concern. Maybe if we can be clear around who has to do what in GitHub, that would be alleviated.
Ben?
John, are you proposing GitHub for everything? Because I think to the point that David, I think, was saying, I see two sets of, let's say, discussions. One, which is basically proposals to get certain work done, right? And then second is more what I call documentation that needs to be more publicly accessible or would be used by different people. And I have the feeling we have two tools. If we move to Linux Foundation, you have GitHub or Git of some sort, and you have Wiki, right? So could we not say for certain pieces we use Git and for other pieces we use Wiki?
That's kind of what I'm trying to propose. Yeah. I think I didn't really propose that in the document that is being shown. That's really more around like what our experience was, with the Google tooling, and then with the LF, what my understanding of the plan is with the LF tooling, but I don't think it's complete what's written there. So I don't know the LF tooling as well. So I would need somebody who does to fill that in more. But what I'm not necessarily making a proposal. I mean, I'm saying what I like. I guess in that sense, it's a proposal. What I would prefer to see is early, highly interactive collaboration done in Google Docs, authoritative design proposals, but tracked via GitHub issues, authoritative design proposals that get approved being in GitHub and going through an approval, PR approval process there, and Wiki used for community level discussions and engagement, pointers to things as sort of the discovery engine for where everything is, and logistics probably, and I don't know. That's where I see it. But
Yeah, I personally I like the Google Docs, but yeah, it seems that some people have challenges with accessing it. But
it seems to have mitigated, like we people were initially, but
we have less people from China. I think that's the reason why we haven't seen as bad of a non-accessible thing.
Okay, yeah. I prefer to have Google Docs into the mix if we can, but then we have three basically capabilities, right? And I agree. I like your proposal basically. So
yeah, if we have a lot of ways to do things, like we need to make it clear what's authoritative in the end, and that's why I like GitHub for that.
Yeah, I mean, besides China issue, there was also the company policy issue, like AT&T employees are not allowed from their AT&T laptop to access Google Doc. They're American company.
Okay. Go ahead, Tal.
Yeah, I just give a a different opinion. My experience with using GitHub has been that there's a very high bar of entry, and it's very difficult to deal with comments, right? Because GitHub does have kind of an internal commenting system, but then if somebody wants to fix something, it is a commit and it becomes a tree, you know, of different commits to pull resources. I say let's not get to that unless we absolutely have to. If we reach a point where where we really need a tight process, but I'm in favor of using documents and comments on them, and you know we have our meetings where we decide on things together. I don't think we have a clear voting structure on things. You know, the community, hopefully by consensus, will accept proposals and move forward with them. If we do get to a point where we need a more formal process, then let's do it. But to me, that might be jumping ahead a bit at this point.
Vish?
Yeah. So, John, you were proposing some of the authoritative documents. So, could go into GitHub. I'm trying to draw a parallel with what we're doing in OpenStack. So, all our comments would actually be the review comments would get captured in GitHub. I know this is in contrary to what Tal was saying right now. So the idea is that people could see each other's comments and respond to those comments, which is also possible in Google Doc too. I mean, that's why I like Google Doc, because hey, it's simpler than going off and trying to do this. You know, we had to go get these MD editors and convert them. So I like Google Docs, but then from a contributors and reviewers perspective, they would like to see that they're able to make their comments there in a fashion and update accordingly. Even version history is also there in Google Doc too, but hopefully we can keep that, you know, the best of both.
Yeah, sorry if I could, you know, I'm kind of jumping the line, but like, obviously in Kubernetes, we still have tons of comments on the PR. So like, as I see it, there's sort of initial generation of ideas, which has like lots of comments that are very ephemeral. And then, you know, you move into like, okay, we think this is basically ready. And then it gets a broader audience. So it's really about the audience. Now our whole community is relatively small, but like what I'm thinking of is like, I have, you know, there might be a document that 2 or 3 people in the community work on to create a proposal. Then it goes to the broader community. That's when it gets converted to MD. But like, I mean, I hear you, Tal, that it's kind of painful, but I don't know in your discussion how we would do the authoritative. I mean, one way we do internally is we just have a status approved. You know, we have a list of approvers and we check them off in the Google Doc. So you can do that too, and it's a little less. Not that we need a list of approvers, but just at some point we need to say this is what the community has decided to execute on. And I think you're the one who brought up the point, Hal. Like, how do we do that today? We don't have a good way to do that. So,
is it a Google Doc features to export a doc to an MD format? I'm just curious. I actually never done it.
Problem is diagrams. You know, there is GitHub now supports. I think it's Mermaid. The kind of, but I think we're all in agreement that it's far easier to create diagrams and with Google Draw or
Doc. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead, Bella.
what I think what John is proposing, if I understand correctly, during the initiation phase where there's a lot of collaboration feedback requirements, I think he's still proposing to do in Google Docs, which is much easier to access, much easier to collaborate, add comments, edit, things like that. It's only when it reached the proposal phase, when it's reached that maturity, at which point of time it needs to be gated and it needs to be it's an authoritative document. That only at that point of time, I think John is proposing to put that in GitHub and follow the PR process from then on. So that is my understanding. If that's the thing, I think it's a fair thing to do. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. This was to Tal's comment. Yeah, Tal, I mean, I know access to is a barrier to entry is there, but the barrier to entry happens only after the maturity of the proposal. Until then, it's kind of easier access.
Yeah, for design proposals, I do think that it should eventually live on Gig. It probably makes sense for me. But anyway, do you have anything to go on, John? Or are you going to go over the document further?
So I know I would prefer people just
read it, comment.
I'd hope people might have commented on it. but I mean, like I said, my goal here is actually to hand this off to the broader community instead of myself sort of executing on it, which is what I've been doing up until now.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm not necessarily, so one thing I know, Tina, so what is the calendaring? We currently have four different iCals. I like subscriptions people need to have. I'm thinking if we move off of Google Calendar, we move to a groups.io calendar, maybe we just make one Nephio calendar, make it simpler. Those are the kind of things I think we need to think about as we do each of these. But I don't know, Tina, do you know, I thought you maybe were the one who asked me a few, like early on, whether there was a groups.io calendar, which made me think you probably know. They probably do have calendars, but I don't actually know that for a fact. Can you provide any background on that tooling? Oh, I don't know. Maybe I should step away.
Tina?
No. Anyway, so you know, a systematic approach to this would be to look at the different things that we need to do as a community and try to determine what tools we're going to use. We just did in the discussion of design proposals. You know, I was just taking what Linux Foundation was going to give us and putting it here. I put some drawbacks and open issues. So please, anybody comment on this. We don't need to decide it right now in this meeting, but like we need to come up with some processes that are lightweight and quick and easy and not.
I know in terms of calendar, I remember on the OpenStack dates, even meetings, you have to check it in. That's a different repo for that to track that. Yeah, but this is to avoid like meeting conflicts and things. But yeah, you could be a contributor just by checking in, like reserving a slot for a meeting. Okay. So any other questions for John's doc? Yeah, please comment on John's doc. If you have any comments.
I would ask that either people comment or that SIG release just make some decisions and move it forward. That's what I would ask.
I think the preference is to use the LF tool chains. Just keep some consistency. We do want to keep Google Docs. I mean, there's some part of us that try to follow the Kubernetes footsteps, and some part of us that try to use what's actually available on LF. Given that, we are paying the money, and then for Google Workspace, at some point we will have to be funded also. But yeah, let's see what they're providing in general. All right. Thank you, John. It's for me. Hey, it does work. I can switch over to the user. All right. So a while ago, actually, almost a month ago, Tina and I had a meeting with Lincoln from RF Edge Labs. He's the equivalent of the chair of RF Edge Lab, and then he's very nice to allow us to use their pods. For one thing, he's actually making a community available for any Linux Foundation members. But then on the other hand, they also want to kind of restrict it to RF Edge or Arduino type projects. So I started playing with it also a while back, and then I just launched it today, this morning, before the net architecture meeting. Today is incredibly slow. It's been 2 hours. It's still going. But what you would see here is you can make reservations off of the pieces, and then when you make the reservations, what you would see today, this morning, is all the x86 pods are taken. So I had to take one from an ARM resource, which is the smallest one actually in here. So they're going, and then they'll show you what the default usernames and passwords are, and then you should be able to go in from this host name. It's not up yet, so you wouldn't be able to see it. So sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We only see from the home page.
Oh yeah, that's true. I've been been sharing tabs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's the bad thing about not sharing windows and sharing tab instead. So when you make reservations on the previous tab, they'll give you a list of things that are available. The only things they can choose from is from UNH, and then the UNH list of resources. Last time, as I showed you guys, is these. This morning, I tried to reserve one to show the community, but then for some reason, it's taking a lot longer than what I previously did. There are all the x86 resources this morning has been reserved, so I'm not able to get it. You can go from for each reservation, you can go from either as low as 1 day and as much as 3 weeks for us, and you have to do a special request to do more than 3 weeks. And then, as you can see, I'm doing 1 day, just trying to show you guys, but then again, it's taking a lot longer than I expected. And the only thing they have left is all the ARM pods. So I take one of the one which is the least resource. But then if it works, then you can use this credentials to log in. They are giving you the host information. So you should be able to SSH directly into the host or into the test pod. And then from that point on, what you get is you choose the operating system, which also is only one available, mainly. And then one that they do support. And then they do have other things like Pixie Boot if you really want to log in that way. But then for simplicity, you pick Ubuntu 20.04. It will boot up with 20.04, obviously with bare minimum things. So from that point on, for us, for Nephio, we'll have to install Kubernetes ourselves manually. Hence, last time during TSC meeting, I was saying that if Sandeep is actually making a presentation, I think on Wednesday, on perhaps Nephio also covering spinning up a cluster. I'm looking forward to see what that covers. When it also does like kubelet installations and all that stuff. If it does, then that would be nice. So we can just reserve a pod and then use that as part of the Nephio tools to bring up a Kubernetes clusters. Otherwise, at this point, all this are manually set up, and they are, they're pretty powerful systems. But yeah, go ahead.
Steven, do you know if there's a documented connectivity between pods? For example, could we create one pod that would be our management cluster and then another pod that would be a workload cluster and be able to?
I think a lot of these things you have to do yourself, but then I think there's an external IP you can reach them, but then you have to set up like the VPN and things all by yourself if you want to create a VPN link between them. Otherwise, it is open to be used. But there's no internal networks to make it expedite. So you basically have to go from an external expose IP from one pod to another pod.
I see. So they are isolated networking.
They are, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But
within a pod, they reach each other using a 10.x address, so that's private. But then pod to pod is separated. As far as I know, so we may be able to check that out. But yeah, I haven't reserved more than one pod yet.
But for hardware availability consideration, would we want to start with more of a virtualized environments? So we would
yeah. I mean, I develop things without using any of this, obviously. So it's taking many hours just to set the hardware up, and then you have a 3 weeks windows at a time, and then by the time you want to reserve, if it's in the busy hours for RF Edge, most likely a lot of the critical resources are taken. So they're
regarding the time. Oops, thank you. Regarding the time experience, you can ask a special lease for up to 6 months. So it doesn't have to be 3 weeks. You have to tear it down.
Yeah, we haven't made that request yet. But then right now we maxed out at 3 weeks, and then if we are making that 6 month reservations, we'll have to work with Lincoln and see how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would make sense if we have to do some sort of functional tests on a real hardware as part of the, probably more like a release thing though at that point. I don't see every check-in would go into an actual hardware.
Yeah, for example, for some projects on the Alpha Edge, for the release, they requested 6 months duration. Yeah, it's exactly the same time of one release.
Mm-hmm. Alexis, do you have something, or you have a question? or comment?
No, I think we did cover it. My point was, we don't necessarily need to have a bare metal environment for the CI to continue testing. You could just virtualize, and we could control networking between VMs, whatever.
Except if part of our test has like SRIOV and stuff. So
so exactly, as soon as we're going to start looking at more hardware specific configuration, well, I don't know the hardware that is available in the lab you just showcased, but this is where we're going to have maybe to have many type of NICs or even DPUs or what depending on the type of offload we're going to do. But that's longer term. I think just for the CI of basic stuff, at least.
For every check-in, I would hope we don't have to go through the hardware.
If you don't like bare metal, you want have some cloud instances, I just post a link. This is works on ARM. It's free. You can get access to Equinix, AWS, and let me check whether GCP is included. Free access. Yeah, GCP as well. And you just request. It's all free.
Anyway, so again, the installation means that you also have to install Multis and other stuff yourself. So we don't have anything automated obviously at this point, and maybe if it's needed, we will have to do that. But I was hoping that SIG 2 would also, it seems like SIG 2's direction is now also maybe including infrastructure setup. That would be awesome.
Steven, will Google, I understood from our early workshop that Google would also offer some Google Cloud space as well? Or
so we definitely didn't hear anyone from the exact team saying that it opens up. I do want to say that if it's GKE resources, Multis is not supported. So it's probably not very useful. Even if I do free 5GC, SMF, and UPF, that they wouldn't be able to run on GKE. If it's GCP of a GCE resources, then you have to still do the same setup. Right? But even then, we have to make a request to exec team and see how they're going to fund it. Do you know anything, John?
We can. I think Colin has said we can get money for. We can get credits for things, but we'll have to figure out exactly what our needs are. So there's a CI/CD need. Like there's a bunch of stuff, builds and CI/CD that doesn't require any kind of special, like even the demo. I think that the POC demo that I did, and then the one that Sandeep is going to do on Wednesday that extends it to do infra. Like all of that could be done, except not with EKS, but it could be done with GKE in Google Cloud. Actually, even could be done with EKS, but somebody would have to provide EKS credits, Amazon credits. The management cluster could reach out there. So we definitely have the ability to do a lot of testing, do a lot of our stuff purely in the cloud environment, and then only resort to lab resources like this when we start wanting to test things that require features that aren't supported in a GKE environment. So that's we can get product, we can get Kandan to pony up
a formal request,
like we spend. I mean, obviously, Kubernetes is a whole different thing, but like Google Cloud gives like millions of dollars in credit to CNCF, right? So we can get some credits to do what we need to do, and as obviously the project matures and grows, and if we're as successful as we hope we'll be, I think that will be able to be worked out.
Yeah, if we prefer Google Cloud, specifically, I put a second link. It's within the Worksong link. It's the T2A VMs, which has the up to 48 vCPUs per VM. This is free. We can use.
Okay.
Just click request.
You're saying we can request resources. Oh, sweet. Okay.
For how long every time? I mean, just asking, just curious.
Yeah, you ask how long you want, and the GCP team will tell you how long you can get. You say 1 year, they say no, 9 months. It's between your bargaining.
Okay, so that would be for, okay, but it is like that would be, we could do ARM-based CI/CD pieces. That could be cool for part of the.
But we want to cross-platform x86 and ARM for sure, because it's an edge deployment, so ARM is very common too.
Yeah,
Steven, do you know?
Sorry
to chime in, but do we know that the free 5GC runs on ARM?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Because I know a lot of the commercial 5G. I know the Nokia one does not at the moment.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure about other, but
yeah, no. So far I don't see anything x86 related. But yeah,
right.
I mean, I haven't tried on.
This is just an option of if you talk about the virtual environment. Here you go. But for the Elf Edge, there were like more than 30 servers, which is x86 based. If you prefer x86, and they provide x86 include the Intel based and AMD based. They provide architecture based include the Ampere, NSP, and Marvell. Yeah, you can choose. There are many kinds of hardware types.
Yeah, go ahead, Bala.
Yeah, for these systems, when we request, say for a particular workload, not if you're doing some real world testing and it requires some kind of a hardware where it requires, say, some kind of a hardware accelerator or some kind of specific NIC, with SRIV enabled things like that. I think it's a similar question also Alexis asked, I guess, in terms of DPU maybe, but I'm asking in terms of other specific hardware requests. Is that possible?
I think last time when An was here, she said that this Thunder X2 is one of their GPUs. So it's very limited, obviously. This is the whole list of pods that you can choose from. But yeah, not some, but not like all variety of different things.
Yeah. Okay. If you're testing some real world stuff, maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think it's gonna affect us in the immediate future because we are thinking about 5GC and things like that. But some real world CUDU kind of a workload may require accelerators and specific kind of NICs with SRIV. So
yes, yeah, there should be a lot more details on, if you click on them, you see what isn't actually in there. But yeah, I do think most of them has SRIV compatible NICs, supported NICs. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We're not the first user, obviously.
Okay, yeah.
I'm wondering.
That's a good thing. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering if it might not be really required now, but in the future, maybe many of the companies that are members of Nephio right now was funding it for the first year, but maybe another company would like to step up and donate some lab resources for us to use on a more permanent basis, because this kind of reinstalling everything from scratch every time is going to get painful at some point. We could maybe extend that to the community at large and see if anybody's interested in sponsoring Nephio in that way by donating some lab space.
Yeah, we can make a request early. I mean, obviously we don't need it now, but then yeah, definitely we should make a request at some point.
But for example, also, I think if you look to the Nokia core, you don't need SRIV is good. Is needed when you need throughput, but you can also run it without, right?
Yeah. You can.
Which will help a lot.
You can use IP VLAN and Mac VLAN just to do connectivity.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Because initially we are more focused on the, let's say, the automation side of things, right? So less so on the throughput and stuff like that. So
correct.
I think it gives you a bunch of options, right? That you are not requiring, let's say, dedicated hardware necessarily.
Right.
It will also depend on how the appetite of the SIG #1 will be in terms of use case.
Yeah, we saw some data path requests today too. Yeah.
I know, right? So if we want to really enter into RAN, and
different story. Yeah,
cage at some point.
Sorry. Yeah. What I'm trying to say is that I mean we can also we will probably need to test on hardware. Don't get me wrong, but we can also try to avoid this if we don't have to, right?
I think as part of the release planning, even hardware requirement should be.
Yeah, definitely. So when we release, there's obviously a list of tested hardware compatible
it's part of the planning itself,
even,
right? Like
even Kubernetes versions,
even
competitive versions, and all the other CAP versions and Porch versions and all that stuff needs to be part of things that are fully tested before released.
So a bit of a
or your Argo things if Tau is introducing that. Also
true, not just Tau, everybody in Red Hat.
Everyone
strongly with Argo, but I'll point out, in terms of also which Kubernetes distribution to use and install, we can of course go really vanilla just with kubeadm, but I think there's probably an interest in using a variety of Kubernetes distributions, and just to make sure that things run on everything. With Red Hat, it's not going to be a problem at all to get free OpenShift licenses, at least for our work. So we can do that at some point too. Red Hat also supports a single node OpenShift. So with limited resources, we can even create a management cluster to say that's a single node. So that works as well. So, but that's something for later on when we really start installing and starting to pick which distributions we want to focus on.
Cool. Well, that's all I have. Is there anything else from anyone? We have 1 minute left. Well done. Thank you. Have a good day for you guys. See you guys again in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Stephen.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all. Good day,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.